Welcome to the Spectators Podcast. Here are your hosts, Corey and Jeff.
Welcome, spectators. We are back. We are sexier, I think, and we are ready to go. We are entering our second season here in the Spectators podcast, and yeah, we're hoping to bring some new, fresh things, some cranking out some more stuff for you folks, and we're hoping you're going to enjoy it. But before we get going, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube, hit the like button, or leave a comment. Let us know what you like and don't like about us. We're adults. We can take it. And on the audio side, we're on Spotify and Apple. Apple was it?
Apple Podcasts and
I was gonna say,
Spotify,
iTunes.
YouTube, all the good stuff, and yeah, like Jeff had said, we're eager to hear your feedback. So let us know if there's anything you want us to cover or anything you don't like. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Absolutely. So we are back. So I see you are wearing a Philly hat. So continuing the trend of your copious amounts of hats. But,
I didn't lie. I told you when I was going to be back home that I have a plethora of hats to wear, and I do have a drawer full of different hats that I can put on. Some probably don't fit my head as well as they used to. This one doesn't. It's pretty tight, so I'm going to want to take it off as soon as we're done. But the Phillies came off a big win yesterday, so I thought I'd celebrate them by wearing their hat today.
Absolutely. And Philadelphia was a happy place yesterday.
Yeah.
Along with the Canucks. We can get to that in a minute. So I'm Jeff. That's Corey. We're really excited to spend some time with you guys. So we are a podcast that talks mostly about WWE and hockey, and then occasionally when things are exciting in the Marvel world, we will also talk Marvel. But today we're focused mostly on WWE and hockey. There's quite a bit going on in both those areas. I was going to say sports. Some folks probably would have not been happy if I said WWE as a sport. Sports entertainment, close enough. But my friend, where would you like to start? Which area? Because we can go on for a while with both of them.
Well, it's been a good month since we talked last, and the last we spoke about was fully a WWE episode. So why don't we go on and kind of catch up where we were on WWE topics, and just kind of, there's a lot that's happened over the last month, so let's talk about
it. A bit.
Yeah.
So that was Clash at the Castle. So yeah, quite a bit has happened, I would say, in the professional wrestling world as well. Just a quick recap for those folks who are trying to catch up, because it seems like every day something crazy. Even today there was quite a big piece of news in the WWE. But so some major big things would have been the all-out fallout, as I've heard it's been called. CM Punk had a bit of a hissy fit at his press conference after winning the AEW World Championship. Not really sure why he's pissed off when he's the top. Anyways, got into a fight with the Elite and Kenny Omega. All parties involved are suspended. Rumor are we're looking at some legal issues here. It sounds like Punk's on his way out. So that happened.
So we're talking Punk, Omega, and what, the Young Bucks were the parties involved in that?
Yeah, did I say the Elite? So yeah, the Elite would be Omega and the Young Bucks. So yeah, all parties are suspended, still are suspended, and there has been no word on when that is going to change. And it's, I guess we can start there. Like, I think moving forward, really what we've seen in AEW is some dirty laundry has been aired a little bit. And I think with Triple H now being the head of, what do they call it? Chief Content Officer, I think he's now called.
Content Officer, head of creative, however you want to, yeah.
It's been very exciting on the WWE side for fans and for the wrestling world in general. Everyone is really commenting how the product has vastly improved since Vince McMahon has retired. I would agree with that sentiment. So I think, and we said this before, I think on podcast, but it's really starting to show now. I think, and I'll get your perspective on it too. That WWE, it seems almost that like it's been a reverse. WWE now is this fun place where everyone wants to go, and AEW is this place of like, oh, there's some backstage turmoil now, and don't really know if Tony Khan's a real good boss, and people want to leave. So it's been a really interesting month of seeing sort of the reversal of stories, because I know when we started this podcast, it was the opposite. We were talking about how amazing Tony Khan was and how Vince is boring and stale. I can't necessarily speak to the storylines, what's going on in AEW right now. It sounds like actually the product is doing quite well, despite people getting in backstage squabbles and things like that. So where you see things right now when it comes to AEW and WWE when it comes to their perceptions?
Yeah, so honestly, like I said, I've been watching for about since about 96, 97, right? So I was pretty young at the time. I don't remember everything at that time, but I've been watching mainly Vince McMahon product, right? And he had his genius mind at that time, and things were really good in the 90s when things were fresh and wrestling was still a relatively new business, right? But things are changing, and like we did go through an era with Vince that was the PG era, as they call it, and it became very stale because they weren't allowed to do certain things, say certain things, and Vince became a little bit more controlling, I think, than he ever had been. With
it sounds like
we heard things like he was fining people like Michael Cole for saying certain words and things like that, which Triple H is kind of squashed now. I think he's brought back that kind of like that 90s feel, that fun feel to things. And like, when AEW started, they just had their 3rd year anniversary, and I think when they started, it was fresh, it was new, it was something that was different, and we're starting to see things kind of fall into the line of what professional wrestling is and looks like, and they still have a unique product in compared to WWE, but I feel like they're starting to follow a similar suit to the way that they're doing things. And you always take a risk when you have a situation where you bring somebody in like Punk, and it's not just at Punk, but you bring somebody in like Punk who had worked for the WWE previously, has had his squabbles, has had his issues, and you're aware of those things. But you're bringing him into a company, and this calls for anybody who came from the WWE, and you're paying them his top dollar, right? Kind of going to like MJF's pipe bomb and all the things he said. I don't think he's entirely wrong in certain ways. That when you bring a top guy in and you pay him well above your top guys in AEW, it's gonna bring some frustration to that locker room, right? I don't get Punk's deal. I don't understand exactly what happened there with the fight and everything. I just think that AEW runs a different backstage presence with EVPs and having people involved in that scenario where they have a stake in the company, they have some say over what's being done. WWE doesn't really have that. They have their high honchos, that's it. That's kind of how it's dealt with, and I think that can create for some frustration as you have guys and girls who are in the locker room who are telling you what can and can't be done.
It's a conflict of interest almost.
It's almost a conflict of interest, and you as talent, like, there's no deniability that Punk is a talent in the industry. He brings charisma. He brings a lot of talent in the ring. We know that, and we can't argue that. So coming in and you're a top guy, you're getting paid top dollar, you come in and now you're told what to do by a guy who's never even been in what some would say the big leagues. WWE is considered the major league of wrestling in general, and I don't think that could be argued. So when you come in and you have guys who are telling you, like, I think the Young Bucks are part of the EVPs as well, and you got guys like Omega and the Young Bucks as EVPs, and they're telling a guy who was brought in, like Punk was arguing, I was brought in to sell tickets and to do well for the company, to build the company up. Yeah, he might not have the right attitude, but he's not wrong. Is why Tony Khan wouldn't have signed the guy if he wasn't going to do those things. We have to agree with that. So I think it could be hard for somebody that is in that situation to then have to listen to guys who don't have experience in the big leagues and they're telling you what to do. And apparently, I mean, we were hearing some things like the EVPs backstage were getting a bit aggressive with the talent. They were getting a little angry with the talent, and they were kind of saying things in a demeaning way, not just to Punk, but other talent as well. I think Punk likes to believe he is a leader in the locker room. I think he likes to believe that. I think he feels that way. And you're putting yourself in a situation, I guess, where you may not be leading by example by, acting the way you do in that scenario specifically. When he was on the stage with Tony, it was a little awkward. Like, watching it back, it was a little awkward watching Tony. And I think the struggle with Tony is, at least I'm seeing, is like Vince had a presence. Vince has a presence. He always did. I don't know if Tony has the same presence that Vince carried with him through WWE's successes. I don't know if they would look at the Tony the same way. Like, now they look at Triple H because Triple H has learned the ropes. He's had experience. I don't know. I mean, that's just my perspective. You look at somebody who doesn't have as much experience. They're kind of Tony was a fan before he started AEW. So, he's I don't feel there's the business person stance behind him as much as like Vince or back when Ted Turner and Eric Bischoff ran WCW. I just don't feel that business presence as much. I feel like he's still a fan and he's still getting into. Of course, he wants to sign CM Punk, and he wants to sign Bryan Danielson and John Moxley and all these guys, and I'm sure there will be WWE superstars that will convert over in the future. I can't deny that. But I also feel like there are people who are starting to see a different side of Tony. He's getting frustrated with. He's trying to put his foot down and become that businessman too late into the game now. It's 3 and a half years in, and you have a situation where now your boss is telling you not to do something, and you've already done things the way you wanted to do them, and now you're not allowed to. It's a change of pace, and we know humans don't like change all the time. It might be too late, and I think for some, so it puts a little bit of puts him in a little bit of an awkward position. But I do see some of his frustrations about WWE trying to talk to some old
tamper,
which
they did do,
which they did, and you know what? Like, I'm sure Triple H could go into that locker room and try to talk to as many people, and he would re-sign anyone he wanted to, apart from John Moxley. I feel like John Moxley
re-signed. Actually, did you see that?
Yeah, he did. I didn't see the term or anything, but he did re-sign. And I feel like he's probably the only one who definitively wouldn't step over to WWE.
He's probably done with them for sure. And I think for me, what the difference is, and I think I've mentioned it before in our podcast, but the difference is, like, I feel like with both brands before H came in, at least from what we're hearing, of course, H has only been in power for a few months, right? So it might be a honeymoon period, right? So we need to give that context that, like, Triple H is doing very well right now, and people are really happy with the product. Like, if apparently USA Network is pretty much is happy, and they've backed off some of their frustrations. I mean, the ratings have gone up significantly since he's taken over.
On both shows, to mention.
Yeah, on both shows. Yeah. I mean, SmackDown's doing over 2 million now.
Which is...
I mean, we'll get into it too. A lot of it has to do with the White Rabbit stuff. But anyways, to take H out of this for a second, you look at Vince and you look at Tony, and I see two, like, opposites, right? I see Vince, who had a very strong presence. And I think that was too much, which led to some of these allegations and ultimately his retirement. Then you have Khan, who is too much on the other side of just, like, he's a fanboy, he wants to hang out with everybody, right? Like, I can't, I don't know how Vince would have reacted if Punk. I mean, Vince never did press conferences after any pay-per-view, so probably that's why we never saw that. But I don't know, right? So, like, it was very telling that Khan didn't stop Punk when he was clearly just out to hurt. Like, I mean, he went after Adam Page for a promo that was nothing, right? I mean, for whatever reason, Punk just wanted to. I actually honestly think one of his main frustrations was he just won the championship again when he was hurt. So he was really pissed off because I think it was close to actually. It's similar to what happened to Cody Rhodes, pectoral injury. But so I like do I think it's too late? No. Like I do think AEW. What I think is that like it's gotten to a point now where it's going to take some time to recover from um
And
what we're
just
seeing
to
in
bring up a
AEW.
point there, I think it may take some time, but I think that it may better recover with newer talent, younger talent, less
Mm.
experienced talent, right? The guys who are top stars, I'm worried they don't have the respect enough there for him. You know what I mean?
Maybe that's why you sign a guy like Moxley, especially to the length of the deal. It's 5 years,
Yeah.
right? And like I don't necessarily know. I haven't seen since Triple H has returned, and they've announced all these returns. I've never seen an announcement with contract
With
length,
deal.
right?
Yeah, and I was gonna say that too. Do you notice like WWE keeps things very private? So like they don't have press
Mm.
conferences. They don't talk about their deals. I mean, you can figure it out if you do some googling and digging. You could probably
Well, they
figure it
do
out
have press conferences now a little bit.
a
Like they did
little
one to have
bit. But
after
this is
Clash. They did have the one
new.
for Crown Jewel, but
But this
like you
is
don't.
new. You wouldn't have seen
Yeah.
this in the past. And let's be honest. We know there's ego in wrestling. There's a lot of ego. There has to be. And
Mhm. Oh yeah,
there's there is squabble backstage behind the scenes. You know
100%.
WWE has squabbles. They have issues. We know that's the case. It's definitive for sure. We don't hear
Mhm.
about it though, and I think that AEW is a little bit more open on what's happening. It's very easy to figure out things like this, and they're very open. They share stuff in the press conference. They don't
Mhm.
always state a character. They sometimes break out a character in these press conferences, and I think this may be some of the reason why it's leading to a little bit of we're hearing things about Tony, we're hearing things about Punk and other things in press conferences where WWE tries to. I think they do a very good job of containing what's going on, but not only
Mhm.
contain what's going on, finding a solution within before it gets out. So like
Oh,
I think
yeah, they're
I
very good at keeping things under wraps for sure.
they are under wraps, and I think a positive of Vince could have been that he may have been a little bit stronger in the suit of conflict resolution with his talent.
A little bit, yes.
Because there may have been
He went too far sometimes.
I'm sure he dealt with it a lot and he was able to resolve a lot of conflict.
Hmm.
And I think that is probably more of his strong suit. And Tony, I think, is struggling with conflict
Well,
resolution.
and it's year three, like we said before. It's year
It's
three,
year
right?
three.
Like, and like I think Tony doesn't. I don't think fully, and with any new business, really, Tony didn't really understand what it's like to actually run a
Run.
wrestling
Yeah.
organization. Like, there's people who's got money, there's TV, like, there's so many factors, and now we're seeing it out, right? Like, Andre trying to fight Guevara so he'll get fired, right? Like those kind of things, right? And um, so what I was trying to say with my point with the contract length of Moxley is to show like the room, and I think what Cohn is trying to say now is like, yes, even though we're getting you're hearing about this backstage stuff, we're working to make things calm and collective. We're keeping the right people, right? Like he gave that long extension to John Moxley. He gave Moxley the belt back, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's to show, we're gonna reward the right people. We're going to and we're gonna have the right people back there, right? Like since the whole squabble, you've seen a lot of Jericho, you've seen a lot of Danielson, right? You've seen a lot of Moxley, guys who I think are taking the company on their back, have pride in that, and can hopefully help the younger talent that are coming in, right? And you know. I think with all that's going on, you are seeing the Malachi Blacks and you are seeing the Andres who now have the luxury or the that door is open again to WWE, and I think that's another stress for Khan is that WWE was a place of hell. AEW was the haven, right? You hear stories from Tony Storm, even Saraya or Paige. Like she mentioned that she had a pretty strained relationship with WWE. Apparently H wanted her back, but at that point, kind of like what's going on with Sasha and Naomi, it's too strained. Because that's the positive thing is that Saraya did sign, right, and she
Right.
felt that AEW was the right place for her, right. So this is the biggest thing that I think is frustrating me so much. I think in general when it comes to WWE versus AEW is that it's people are trying to people are trying to pit the two brands against each other, and it's natural competition. I
Mm-hmm.
understand that, but like, why can't we have good things? Why can't we have both, right? Like, yeah, there's going to be natural competition for new talent coming up, or when talents contracts expire on either side, that they're going to go to either or promotion, right? Like that's fine. And I think it's a healthy and to me fun debate to compare, like, for example, the return of Bray Wyatt versus the return of CM Punk, right? Like both got tremendous pops for both brands, right? So, which one was better in your opinion, right? An awesome subjective argument that we can have because there's another wrestling brand, right? We hadn't had that for so long. Now we do, and I think, like, from, like we've said before in this podcast, like we, like, throughout the week and on weekends with pay-per-views or premium live events, whatever the heck they want to call them these days, like we get a lot of really good entertainment, right? So, and I think I just really want that to stay. And for me, like, I just want this whole thing with the AEW to calm down, right? Like, and apparently Khan doesn't want to release Black or Andre. He doesn't want to release anybody. And the two sides of the story is, well, you should just release them. Don't make them stay. They're gonna, example was Andre trying to fight Guevara. You got a cancer in your room. The other argument, which I think is fair too, is you sign that contract, right? Like, I mean, mind you, in other
You mean
sports,
from the wrestler's perspective?
no, well, sort of. Like, so the wrestler's perspective, they're like, release me.
Yeah.
I think from management's perspective is, no, you sign this contract.
Yeah.
Like, you committed. We gave you a generous term, which I agree with. I mean, it's not like other sports, because other sports do have trades, but they don't necessarily always get respected, and it's sometimes you gotta awkwardly go back to your team and play out the rest of your contract, right? Like, I think, the guys that are asking for the releases, like Black and Andre, like, they've got longer term they got three plus years left on their deals, right? Like, that's a lot of, like, it's a lot to leave on the table just to say that's fine. And you don't want to also have the other situation where if someone's just unhappy with AEW, they just go, screw it, release me, right? Like, that's, I don't think that's good for business either, right? But my hope is that, like maybe release these folks now, whatever. Do a non-compete clause for, like, do some sort of, like, ridiculous non-compete clause, like 6 months to a year, right? So that there's some consequences to it, right? Because then they can't just jump right, because there was a rumor that they wanted Malachi Black for Bray Wyatt's faction, right? So, like, that would, like, and what would, like, that would send a bad message in my opinion. If Black did get his release, he goes right over to WWE and then gets into this very popular faction that everyone really wants to see. So I think it's complicated, but I do hope that things calm down and AEW can thrive, because I think really we're like, it's competition is really good for both sides, and just, again, like, as we've said multiple times on this podcast, like, it's good to have both. It's good to have
it's good to have competition, right?
It's good to have WWE and see their product, and it's good to see how AEW does things different. AEW does things differently from WWE, and then having weekends where we had Clash on a Saturday and then All Out on a Sunday, like, that's fantastic. I'm hoping we get to keep that. So yeah, that's my hope for AEW.
You certainly can't go wrong with that, and I want to see continued competition, because without competition you can't grow, right? Like, the WWE won't have the chance to grow. And I know we talked about this before. I don't know if it was on the podcast or personally, but we talked about Triple H's stance on AEW and how he said, like, I don't feel him as a threat, but they are there. We don't watch them that much, but we do pay attention to what's going on. It's like, we pay attention to everything. We pay attention to sports. We pay attention to basketball, football. We know what's going on. We know
football's their biggest one, for sure.
Right? And they know the marketing, and they understand how things are being marketed. I think to that point, like, of course AEW has work to do. They're still so young in comparison, right? So they have work to do. But I think they're doing a really good job for seeing that they're only in 3 years. They've got a good backing from fans. They've got good viewership. They do have wrestlers who clearly still want to be there. Those who want to be there, and those who are leaving WWE and still going over to AEW, because we're still seeing that happen. And I think we'll still see that happen. We'll still see wrestlers potentially leave ROH and go to AEW full time, and I know they're kind of the same entity, but or even Impact Wrestling or NJPW. The options are endless. I think that this is good for talent too, because they can choose what brand fits them, And what
Yeah, absolutely.
because when you look at it, like any job, if you see the value in the company you're working for, and their values match you as a wrestler, I think that's going to be really important for having those options. You're going to see better talent. But to your point, if we have people who are getting released and running over, that's one side that could be bad. But on the other side here is if we decide not to release them and we keep them in that position, we could run into a lot of issues with them putting out poor product. Pipe bombs could happen. Backstage squabbles could happen, and there could just be more resentment for the company. So we may see some issue with them staying, and that could be another reason why it makes sense to release them, because we don't want to see those kind of things happen, right? We don't want bad product being put out on purpose because you're kind of resentful.
It's such a slippery slope, right? Because you just don't want every single person who has made a 3-year contract. It's so different than professional sports, right? Because there's no option to trade, right? Like that. Usually you can solve that in a trade, right? But that doesn't exist in professional wrestling, right? And I think it's just a slippery slope, because if you just release everybody who was unhappy, then you might not have wrestlers, right? Because it's like, okay, fine, you're not booking me right, and WWE or NJPW is offering me more, I'm just going to leave, right? Like, I think you have to protect your product a little bit, and I think you have to have consequences for people who are being toxic, right? Like, I don't, right? So, like, it's hard to say what happened with the CM Punk and the Young Bucks and Omega, but they're all suspended, right?
Yeah, they're all suspended right now. Yeah.
And sounds like Punk is going to get fired. I don't know. We'll see. I'd be very difficult for me to imagine Punk coming back after what happened.
Yeah. But we're also not Tony Khan, so we don't know what going through his head and what he's going to decide to do either.
It's very true.
And I think that there's probably some sort of stipulation that if they're suspended, or they're injured or something like that, in the time that they're suspended or the time that they're injured, they can something written into their contract that they can prolong that contract. So if they were suspended for 3 months, I think they could probably extend that contract for 3 months in a fair way.
Well, it's paid though, so I don't know. Mind you, so is injury. But I know for injury for sure that's the case. I don't know about suspension, because suspension I feel like it's a different game, because you've done something wrong, right?
You've done something wrong, and they chose, even though you're healthy, to take you off the roster. Just an interesting theory I had to your point here. No trade, no nothing like this. I'm curious if AEW could even structure this way. But we talked about how they have so much talent, they just don't have enough TV time. I wonder if they bumped, let's say, a Rampage to 2 hours a week, if they could consider having a brand split, like where they had Dynamite roster and they had a Rampage roster.
Because of WWE.
Yeah, which is, and I wonder if they could consider, at first maybe Rampage is a second tier show where they're going to have more of their B talent showcased. That's fine. I'm just really curious if they could even structure that way, where maybe when they sign their new TV deals, if they could sign for 2 hours, because I think that could help build the brand a little bit. We could have more things like war games or battles against brands and things like that, because that's always fun, right? You're always seeing some fun, and then you could potentially have 2 championships. You could have one. You could.
So show. And that's the biggest challenge, right? So right now, Dynamite and Rampage are filmed on the same night, right? Yeah. So if you added another hour at this time, you'd be asking that audience to stay longer. It happened with Grand Slam.
Yeah,
I think they made Rampage 2 hours, so folks were in the building till like 2-3 in the morning, I heard, which is very difficult. It's really hard to get a good crowd reaction. So I think certainly, and I believe the TV deal for AEW is coming up next year, and I think that's a huge emphasis for Khan. I know he's trying to get our TV deal for ROH. I think that will also help with talent not feeling on TV. If they get a contract for ROH, then some of those talent can move over. Because Jericho's a championship.
Used to have a TV deal, I think, a long time ago. So
that's why Colin bought it. He really wants to get it up, right? I mean, the challenging thing right now is ratings are down for Dynamite right now. Yep. It's below 1 million, which is not.
Dynamite or for Rampage?
For Dynamite,
For
this last
Dynamite.
Dynamite was, I think it was 940,
Yeah.
940,000, which is low for them. So I'm hoping that they can rebound. And but the problem is that I think there was some play. I mean, they have playoffs, right? I mean, WWE is seeing this similar hit to their ratings due to football, right? So it's natural. So hopefully it'll tick back up when it comes
I
to
think so.
the playoffs ending. But I do want to move off of this topic because I
Mm.
really, really want to talk about, I think, the hottest topic in WWE, which is the return of Bray Wyatt. Um, so I did really want to get your thoughts on this because, like you said, you've been watching WWE for quite some time. For me, this is the first time I've really got to see a big reveal. Haven't seen one before. Like I missed the Cody Rhodes one at WrestleMania, but there wasn't a lot of build up for that, right?
No, that was a real surprise. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'm curious, like in what you've seen in these kinds of reveals. And I know they did a similar type of tease for the Fiend, but Bray Wyatt was already on the roster at that time. Like, where do you feel like that fits all time when it comes to WWE reveals? Because it started with the White Rabbit QR codes. It was really mysterious, right? And it kept going and going and going, and then it finally you got, for me, which was a fantastic reveal. I've watched that reveal like four times. You got the whole world in your head. It gets stuck in my head constantly. For me, I think it was done like so brilliantly with how they teased it with the QR codes and things like that, and like it got to me, you got such a good payoff because the reveal was fantastic. And then we can discuss a little bit his appearance on Friday. So what do you think about the reveal itself, like, and the lead up to it, and where do you feel like it fits all time in the WWE?
I loved the reveal. I thought it was really cool. I loved his ability to. I love that they allowed him to pay homage to Brody Lee. I don't know if you. I talked to you
Yeah,
about
the
this,
the
but they
door, right? It was the door.
the door. One of the masks of Sister Abigail, was very similar to a mask that Brody Lee wore. Um, I think it was beautiful. It was a really good homage that side of things. Uh, the just the reveal. It was a fun way to break down, and I had a lot of ups and downs myself of, is it going to be Bray Wyatt or is it not going to be Bray Wyatt? And I wanted to believe it was, but I think I was just scared of the disappointment. I didn't want it to not be him and then be
I
disappointed,
think a
because
lot of fans were like that. Yeah,
there was a lot of talk of Bray for months. Like, we've heard it for since what,
on
May,
so.
I think. So there's been a lot of talk for a really long time, and then you have to consider someone. There's always a reason why someone was released. So if they were released, there's always potential that the company might not want them back. So there's always something like that running through your head. But I'm a little off on a tangent here. Let me just say though, the reveal itself, it was great. It was really well done. Just having him come out with that lantern, pull the mask off, blow the lantern out, and it was great because it still gives you some, I want to see more.
Oh yeah.
I don't like I didn't like what they did the next night. So on Raw, where they were kind of like, oh yeah, Bray Wyatt, and they gave you the feel that he might be there, but they just showed what happened, and I didn't like that, but I loved that he came back on Friday. Um, we'll get to that in a second, but you asked me a second piece was where I kind of like sit this return, and where I kind of feel this fit into all the returns in the past. My favorite return, this is going to sound biased, my favorite return of all time was Chris Jericho in 2007 on Monday Night Raw, from, I think, a 3-year hiatus where he was with
Wow.
Fozzy and doing his band and everything. We honestly thought he was never coming back at that point. He just kind of went into his music career, started going into some acting. And they did a very similar, and I think I said this to you, that I got some Chris Jericho-esque feel from that reveal, and they didn't have QR codes at that time. I don't think it was a thing, but
No.
there were little pieces, little vignettes, little puzzle pieces throughout. And if you want, I'm sure you could YouTube and find some of those things. But and they had happened for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we got to the point where we realized it was going to be Chris Jericho, but when was he coming? And he came back, and the clock struck, and you got to see the letters and the puzzle change into "Save Us" Y to Jay, and you realized it was him. And then after that happened, it went dark. The music hit. Chris Jericho's music hit. The pyro hit, and here he is standing in his infamous pose. You know, the Y2J pose at the front of the entrance under the Titantron. And I don't know, I talk about this and this still gives me goosebumps, like just remembering this. I've watched his return at least 30 times over my life. I just think it's one of the coolest returns I ever seen. It was against Randy Orton, who was in the ring at the time and was one of the biggest superstars growing in the company at the time. And he was a big part of putting Randy over at that time too. So I think there was just so much to it that was just so creative, and I felt a lot of that with Bray's creativity and the way that Bray did things, and I thought that was really cool. So I mean, there's been some great returns. I mean HBK, Shawn Michaels back in 2002, Jericho in 2007, Edge in 2020, I think, in the Royal Rumble, Undertaker back in 2004 when he dropped that American Badass and went to, you know, back to Deadman Undertaker, and was coming against Kane, and I think there's just been so many good returns. You know, Triple H's return back in 2002 after his quadricep tear, like you name it. There's so many different returns that you can think of. Bray's has to be up there. I mean, top 5. I can't pinpoint. Yeah. I can't pinpoint a number, but like it's got to be one of the coolest, at least within this last era, this last 10 years. Probably one of the coolest I've seen, for sure.
Well, I think this one's incredibly unique too, because I'm sure you saw this. I joked with you, like, this is what happens when you bridge Marvel and WWE. So WWE did hire a Marvel writer who actually, before The Fiend was released, pitched to WWE making a Fiend movie, and his name has escaped me at the moment. But he was working with Bray Wyatt, I'm assuming, on this return. Which gets me excited for, because so this person's title is now director of long-term storytelling
in WWE.
Yes. So it makes me kind of happy to see, like, he'll be handling the bloodline stuff. He'll be handling probably the returns of. We'll see about Orton, who apparently his back's pretty bad. But anyway, Orton, we have Rhodes coming back, right? So I'm actually really excited to see what he's going to do with other returns. I mean, like, Bray was always going to be exceptional because he's an exceptional person.
His creativity is there. So I think it's cool because you have kind of a collaboration between this individual from Marvel and someone we know, being Bray, being so creative. And I've watched Bray since he was Husky Harris back in NXT. And his growth, like, I don't know if you've seen kind of Bray and the Wyatt family and some of that, but his growth in WWE has been tremendous. And to see where he is now, it's just amazing. I gotta say, like, over the last 6 months or so, since there's been some new returns and stuff, they've been pretty good. Like, they've either been really surprising, like Cody, like, we all speculated it, but you just never know, right? These are rumors from companies and Meltzer and things like that these people might be coming back, but until you hear that music hit, you don't know that person's coming back. So without a vignette, you know, a return like that's cool. But like Edge's return back when he was doing the promos and the vignettes, that was really cool. Bray's was really cool. I think Cody's so much of a face, he doesn't need a huge vignette kind of building.
He won't, yeah.
But these have been really cool ideas, and I'm really excited to see kind of these vignettes that have, like, just let's give those two, Edge and Bray, these kind of things. This reminds me of, like, those early 2000s, mid 2000s kind of days when WWE was really doing a lot of those storytelling vignettes, and like, I think storytelling is such a big part of this industry. It's amazing. Like, hey, it's great when you have a return like Johnny Gargano, for instance, like that. It's surprising, it's cool. And Candice LeRae, like, a couple weeks later, like, those are cool. But when you have storytelling build up to it, and you have and Bray also has so much background, right? They gotta do something like this for when Randy returns. Like, they have to. Like, Randy, I gotta get your opinion on something. I'm just kind of thinking here. Randy's had a bit of time out. He's gonna be out for a while. The company's in such a different place now than when he left. So much different. Do you believe he comes back as a heel, or do you believe he comes back as a face?
He has to. I think he was a heel when H was around, right? And he did. Like now that Riddle is sort of established himself as a singles competitor, right? I think he's done a fantastic job, right? He's had a bangers of matches with Seth. Had a really good match with Roman, right? The caveat to that is the men's tag division is well, mind you, H is fixing it, but the men's tag division sucks right now. But like, I think they're like, I guess it's complicated because they have so many heels right now. There's maybe like 5 faces, maybe even less, right?
I don't even know if I can name the faces. We like McIntyre,
Lashley, Riddle. I think male faces. Some male model. I'm just kidding.
I guess LA Knight is a face. Yeah.
Oh, he's actually a heel. Did you hear his
he's a
promo
heel.
on Friday?
Okay, he's a heel.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's definitely a heel. He did the typical
yes.
I hate your sports team heel move.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more, but I can't really
You
so
just
the problem
can't think
is,
of any standout faces. That's the thing. So that's the point I was trying to make.
well, I guess you have Gargano and I believe Owens is listed internally as a
I
face
would say
too.
so right now.
So even then, over 2 shows, you've got 5, which is a problem. Mind you, I don't know how many faces are in AEW, but anyways, I think the problem is it's twofold. The problem is that Randy is his best as a heel, but we're missing some faces. But like, it would be, I don't really know what his face run looks like in the singles realm. But
Me too.
yeah, I mean, he's always been really good as a heel, right? So, but
I
know.
feel if he comes back and he does do another heel run. Sorry if this hurts anybody's feelings. I think he's going after Riddle right away.
Makes sense, right? Because Riddle's going to need someone to feud with after he's actually facing Rollins on Monday for the U.S. title. I think Rollins obviously will win that one.
So. But I think he's going after Riddle, and I think this is Randy's time that he'll be able to help put younger talent over. And
yeah, maybe he could feud with Judgment Day. I don't know. Like, there's lots of things he could do. And what I'm really actually enjoying about, just before we get to, I really want to talk about Bray's appearance on Friday. Like, I'm really enjoying some of the stuff. Like, I'm really enjoying Damage Control. I'm loving seeing Bayley have Dakota Kai and Io Sky in her faction, teaching younger talent. I'm enjoying the fact that she's fighting, at the Candice Relays, Roxanne from NXT. Like, she's really working hard to put over the younger talent. I'm enjoying seeing Solo Sikoa in the Bloodline. I mean, it's a natural fit, right? But he's younger, right? Like, I think, like you've said, and what I can really gather is, and actually, Triple H said it himself, like, NXT got railed for 2 years because of the pandemic, right? So they're missing a lot of young talent to replace. Seth's not getting any younger. Neither's Roman. Right,
AJ Styles. I mean, there's a lot of people on the roster that, they're towards the end versus towards the beginning.
I was chuckling to myself too because I know when Edge was in Judgment Day, he was saying like Damien's like a younger, like next level. He's 40.
Damien, he's 40. Yeah,
I'm like, how is he? Anyways,
I think this happens in WWE a lot where people start late, right? They work in the indies and then they kind of start later.
Well, it was nice to see someone like Roxanne because she's 20, so it was nice to see, especially
she was younger too when she started.
So I think H is realizing this, that the roster is getting older, right? Like Cody's 35, right? He's in the mid 30s.
35 turning 36, yeah. Somewhere
right? And he's in great shape. Like I don't doubt he can wrestle for the next 5 years, barring any more nasty injuries.
Will he want to is the question too.
Yeah. Right. So I think they I think that's why Theory's sticking around, right? I don't know how old Gargano is.
I think he's on the older side, 35 or 36.
Right. So I think they need to have more Theories, more Roxanne. Like they need to really start getting these guys into factions. And I'm hoping actually with Wyatt's faction, because it sounds like he's going to have a faction.
Mm-hmm.
They do mostly younger, I mean, I don't know how old Liv is now, but like maybe it's a Liv and not Bliss, right? Like maybe it's, I don't know, a couple guys from NXT, right? So he can work with them and mentor them and train them to be on the main roster, right? I don't know how old Bray is, but I'm sure he's not young, right? I know he's from the H days. He used to be, I think he started out in the Florida League. What was that called? FCW?
FCW, yeah.
Right? So that doesn't mean he's young, right? I mean, it's like everyone that's big right now, including the Usos and right and Roman, right? Like they've all we all
He's
went through that
35.
area,
He's 35.
right?
Well, you got to think about it too. Like you think about back when it was Austin, The Rock, Undertaker, Kane. These guys were all probably over 30. I think The Rock was the
Mm-hmm.
youngest of the talent at that time. The Rock was probably the youngest at the time. And like you look at all those guys now and they're into their 50s and 60s, right? So yeah, for sure. I think that you hit your prime in wrestling when you're in 30, 31, 32, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And some guys definitely wrestle a lot longer than others, right? Triple H just
Mm-hmm.
retired recently and he's 52, 53,
Only
something like that.
because he almost died too.
Yeah, exactly. Jericho's still wrestling at 53. Ric Flair was, I would say, technically wrestling until he was in his 60s, and then retired just after this last match at 73. But that was just a one-off thing. But like into his 60s, right? Sting in AEW jumping off freaking rafters at 62 years old. And I mean,
I know. I hope we're that virile or whatever the word is. Like, yeah, it's spunky at 62.
so I mean, like there are talent that wrestles longer and some wrestle a little too long, but
Mhm.
there's also talent that's still in incredibly good shape and athletic. Like
Well, look at Lashley and Brett Lesnar, who are probably going to face off at
Lesnar,
Crown
and
Jewel.
look at what Jericho's still able to do with
Mm-hmm.
storytelling at 50 something. Look at Billy Gunn over in AEW with the Acclaimed. Like he's doing good stuff on the mic and he's still in incredible shape to wrestle. So there are people who can do it. Mind you, not everybody can. And you got to think about those
Mm-hmm.
people like Seth who he's talked about a number of times that he wants to be a family guy and he doesn't necessarily want to do this for the next 10 years. So you do have to start building talent like Theory, like
Yeah.
uh, uh, and it's hard to even think of how many people are there that are young.
Well,
To be
so if you think
honest,
of like NXT, you got Braun Breaker, you've
Braun
got, I
Breaker,
mean, Mandy Rose isn't young, but
she's
I'm actually,
probably 30. She's probably our age, 30, 31,
yeah.
which is the same as
So
Bliss. And
there's Mandy, there's Cora Jade, like there's Toxic Attraction, right? There's a few like
so Cora Jade's
um
only 21, which is good.
mhm.
That's young talent. Mandy
she'll
Rose.
she'll be on Raw tomorrow actually.
Oh, will she? Okay.
Yeah, so
So Mandy
NXT's got
Rose
a
is 32. So there you go. So she's another one that's up there.
yeah, so but I mean like Mandy Rose could come with Toxic Attraction,
She
all
could.
three of them, right? It'd be another new faction. Anyways, like I think they really need to start looking at who's in NXT, who can start to be brought up. I mean, they've already done it, right? Like they've Los Lotharios, the other new faction that just got brought up on with Friday with Selena Vega. I cannot remember their name.
I don't
Um,
remember, but I know who you're talking about. There's also Hit Row, which is
Hit
getting big there.
Row.
Yeah, yeah. There is starting to be some more tag teams that are going to be brought up to both divisions. I think the men's and
Yeah.
women's divisions, which is great.
Yeah, no, and like it'll be good because like they can hopefully get like the Bronze and the Mandys, right? Get some of that. I mean, Cora Jade's 21, but like I think if like I think if you do it right, you can have her on the main roster,
Mhm.
right? Because then you can bring in other talent, right, into NXT and really start developing them, right? I think actually they sent a few folks back down to NXT, like including Veer Mahan and Drew Gulak. So they're doing a bit of a reverse. But it's also actually again, like, it's nice to see that H is also sending down. Like so, Shayna Baszler's been down there.
Mhm.
Sonya Deville was just down on NXT just the other week, right? Roxanne
Well,
just fought.
you got to remember they do put some people on assignment, I guess you could say, or
Mhm.
like back from injury or whatever. Like, what is it? Finn Balor was back down there for a year, won the title again down there, had a really
Yeah.
good run down there, came back up.
Well, Mandy Rose, right? Because she was on the main roster, right?
Yeah, she was on the main roster, but Finn was already a WWE champion and got sent down there. And I think that sometimes sometimes people need that. I don't think
Yeah.
it's a bad thing to be on there. I think Dolph Ziggler was just recently down there and won the NXT
Mhm.
title, just to
I
kind of
think
shake
that's
up the
and development too, right? So
shake up some
I'm
of the
actually
roster.
happy Veer got sent back down
Me
because he's
too.
now going to he's going to tag, and then it'll be another men's tag that can come back up. But anyways, I do really want to get to last SmackDown
Yeah.
because what obviously was generating a lot of buzz was Bray Wyatt returns. And for me, I think a very it was a really excellent return, right? To add on top of what we saw at Extreme Rules. And for me, why it was excellent was because you got to see Wyndham Rotunda. I know he called himself
Yeah.
Bray, but you saw Wyndham
Wyndham,
Rotunda,
yeah.
right? And he got the opportunity to really thank the fans for keeping him. He said alive, right, and keeping him interested. And like he said, like I tried to go and hide, and you wouldn't let me. So I really liked the fact that he got to be out of character. I think, and he even said it. This is the Bray Wyatt that I don't that you've never seen before. It's Wyndham. That's why. What I loved about it was he got to say his thank yous. He got to say his piece. Show some serious emotion. And now we can get to the other awesome part about Bray, which is the the fight within himself. Which I know we did that with the Fiend, so it's nice to see a new character. I was wondering if the Fiend was going to come back, so I'm really glad to see that it's not. Like it's going to be a new character with new aspects, and I do really hope they drag out this Bray Wyatt who's so thankful to be back versus this whatever this mask is, right? And what that's going to look like, and then him eventually building a faction. So what did you think about his return on SmackDown?
I liked his return. I liked to see him come out. I thought he got a good reception from the fans. I really liked. I had some up and downs about it. I really liked
Mm-hmm.
the fact that he was able to really show his emotion. We were able to see Rotunda. We were able to see him as a person, and not a character. And I felt his emotion. I felt
I did too.
emotional when he was talking. My partner was sitting beside me watching because she was excited to watch Bray Wyatt return. And she got emotional. We all did, and I think he really captivated us as a crowd, as us watching at home. Um, I gotta get your opinion though. I was a little confused because when the mask, whatever, popped up on the screen, I don't know if it was just me, but I couldn't really understand what he was saying. I couldn't capture everything that was said. I don't know if it's because
I
it's muffled by a mask or
I
what.
think that the intention was to catch most of it, but not all of it. If that
Because
makes
there were
sense.
some things that I felt
Because
like
of
I
the static.
missed, and I was yeah. So I was confused. But I've been hearing rumblings of WWE has just re-signed. What's his name?
Bo Dallas,
Bo Dallas, which is Rotunda's
brother.
brother in real life. I can't remember his name. And maybe it's Taylor. I can't remember. Anyways, I don't think he's coming back as Bo Dallas. I don't think he's coming. Do you know anything about Bo Dallas?
Not really.
No.
Although stuff I saw with the faction with Bray.
He was a comedy act.
Mm.
He had one of the best runs in NXT. He was like he should have had superstardom. He had the body, he had the talent, he had everything. He has the face, he's got the look, he's got everything that Vince would have wanted. And for some reason he came up to the WWE main roster and they threw him as a freaking comedy act, and I hated it. He was part of the B team. It was a joke. And he got released too, but I feel like I've been hearing rumblings that he's been signed, and he's going to be part of this faction. My curiosity is, I wonder if he's behind the mask too. I thought about it, and
Bo?
I thought about it at first, and I was like, it's Bray, right? Because Bray wore the mask out.
I think so. Yeah, I do too.
So I initially think that, and I'm like, but I wonder if it's also because I have two thoughts here, and it could go either way because they haven't given us very much. But I have two thoughts here. It's either Bray as his alternate personality again, like the Fiend and him, or it's his brother who's trying to tell you about all the bad things that WWE did to you, all the bad things that the fans have done to you, and he's a heel and Bray's a face, and we see that. So I wonder if that's how they could could potentially play him in, and maybe all the faction wears the mask. I don't know. Like, it's like I got a very V for Vendetta kind of vibe from that, and I'm thinking, how they wear the masks. So I'm like, maybe the part of the faction, they're all gonna wear masks, but it's gonna be the same masks, because when it was like the Wyatt family, they all wore masks, but they were all different masks. They were like sheep and things like that, right?
So kind of like what Firefly Funhouse was.
Kind of, yeah. So Bray's always kind of got this like creepy vibe to him. But like, if his brother comes back and he has a faction, like, is he being pulled in two different directions this time because of someone else, or is it still his alternate personality? So I'm really curious to see how they play this out. And how he's influenced, like, even if it's not his brother, is he almost influenced by this idea of a faction, but that maybe this time it's not actually his own mind. Maybe it's media or somebody else. We don't know yet. We really don't know. But I do assume it's probably going to be another alternative personality. It's just that we've seen that a few times with Bray. So I wonder if they go a different direction. That's still my only thought there. But I thought it was cool. I really think that I was a little disheartened at the end, because I was like, oh, it's such an emotional like time. You get to see Bray talk about things and like how he lost two of his best friends, and he got really emotional about it, and then they just cut it off and did that. So I was kind of like, I guess my heartstrings at the time, like, it was just that moment. I was like, oh no, like I wanted to see Bray like talk more about stuff.
It was awesome.
And
I think it was
yeah.
I think it was a great way to stop it, because I think it's very Bray-esque, right? It's very on brand of what we've been seeing, where it was just like, he's about to pour his heart out to the fans, and then this, to me, I think it's his alternate personality. I think they're doing another version of that. It cuts him off and says, no, you listen to me. And here's my dream match, because it's called Survivor Series. Bray comes to the ring with the dark lights and stuff, and then he has a 10-minute match with the mask. Himself, tried the mask, like like the movie The Mask, where he fights with the mask. Like I would love to see Bray have a match against himself, basically for 10 minutes, when eventually the mask wins, and then that begins the faction.
So you are exactly in the direction that I was gonna go, but here's the twist. He's in the ring, he's fighting the mask, but it's not just the mask. He's fighting someone wearing the mask. You think it's Bray. He's got the tattoos. He's got the look. He's got the hair. It looks like Bray, but it's not Bray. And I think about this because like WWE has done this in the past, and they've done this with Triple H's touch and understanding on things in the past when he was young, and he was very involved with Vince and stuff too, and in the company. And I think of Kane, an imposter Kane. I think of Undertaker and imposter Undertaker. If you have some chance, go to YouTube it. Kane versus imposter Kane, Undertaker versus imposter Undertaker. I think you could have him fight somebody. You think it's Bray. You don't know who's the real Bray, who's the real Fiend. They could dress him up as the Fiend, and he's wearing this mask. They could go in different directions. Pull the mask off after he wins, and it's Bo. And then you realize it's not necessarily that Bo was the one. It is his alternate personality, but Bo was the one that was dressed up as the imposter. I don't know. There's ways that he could go. It could even be that he wrestles the Fiend, like him himself wrestles the Fiend to kind of close that chapter, and then somehow this mask comes up on the screen behind him. There's different ways that they could really do it, but I think a kind of idea of Bray versus Bray, or like two sides of Bray, where you can actually have a wrestling match. That's why I thought, who better to bring in than his brother, because he looks similar to him, right? So like it's an easier way to have him impostered. And then Kane and Undertaker, when they were doing these things, like I think Undertaker was wearing a mask at the time, and the imposter was wearing a mask, or his hair was covering his face or something, and Kane he was wearing a mask, so it's easy to do something like that. I don't know.
That makes sense.
I like the idea of him kind of fighting his inner demons is kind of the storyline. Because he's never
that was totally a joke, but you turned it into a legitimate booking. Very good.
WWE, if you're looking for any more bookers, I've got ideas. Even if you want to do it virtually.
Fantastic. So I think we'll close the chapter on the professional wrestling world for this episode, and we'll move into. But first, please let us know your thoughts on how things are going when it comes to the wrestling world. What did you like about the Bray Wyatt return? What did you think about what's going on with AEW versus WWE? Leave a comment. Let us know what you're thinking too. We'd love to get your perspective on what's going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to know what you think, and I think with your feedback too, we're gonna have more ideas that are gonna pop up onto the plate. Things that you want us to cover, things that you don't want us to cover. And
Stop talking about Jericho. I'm totally
stop
joking.
talking about Jericho. Stop talking about the Fiend or whatever. It doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
let us know. We love to hear that, and it's just gonna help us continue providing you with the content you want to hear.
Absolutely. So we'll move into the NHL and hockey world now. So just since we're a little bit into this, just remind everybody to hit subscribe on YouTube, leave a like for us, or subscribe on our audio channels, which is Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But yeah, the NHL season is underway. Things it's roughly 2 to 3 games in for most teams. Yeah. So what are your impressions so far on the NHL season, and what are sort of the things you're kind of looking out for and watching for this season?
It's so early. It's really hard to tell. You know, it's really difficult to tell sometimes in sports when you come out this early and you have a good or bad season, because things can turn around midway through the season. Things could be exactly the same for the rest of the season. It's hard to say. Uh, it, I'm not liking what I'm seeing from Vancouver so far. I feel there's definitive holes in just like their game, like just in general, between the defense, the offense, goaltending. Like I just feel like there's a lack of chemistry or something in the room. I don't know what it is, but I mean, there's been a couple struggle games. They played what, 2 games now, 3 games now,
Two.
two, and both games they came out with a strong lead and blew it. Um, you are playing against Connor McDavid's. I'm just gonna call the Oilers the Connor McDavid's because he scored a hat trick and scored most of their goals. So I think that's how we all look
That
at
he
the
did.
Edmonton Oilers now. But yeah, he had his moment and he made us look bad. But
What do you call Philadelphia then?
Philadelphia was a little bit of a breakdown. Just the overall just.
Players wanted to watch the Phillies game.
Apparently, they just wanted to watch the Phillies game. But then you look at a lot of other teams, and it's like kind of mix and match. Like they've had a good game and a bad game. Some teams have came out strong, very strong, and then you got a team like let's say Vegas, because I like Vegas. Interesting opening because they've played 3 games now, but they've played three wobbly teams, not very good teams in the first 3 games. You look at Chicago as a struggling team.
Yep, Conor Bedard sweepstakes.
Seattle, I think they'll be better than they were last year, but I do
Too.
still think they're still on the lower end of where they will be. And their first game was probably their best game, where they played against a tougher Kings team, where I think they ended up winning, and it was a tight game. So they've had 3 different games where some other teams are playing more challenging games. I think Dave Gosher said it really well during the broadcast of Vegas. It said, Seattle came out last year. They were 30th in the league out of 32. And that's exactly where you would expect a typical expansion team. But Vegas was a one-off situation where they made the Stanley Cup final that first year. But Seattle's exactly where they were expecting to be. They haven't spent a lot of money. They haven't overpaid players. They haven't put themselves into a situation where they're going to have to pay a bunch of players way too much money in 3 or 4 or 5 years. I think they've done things right. They do their marketing right. They're taking the right steps. They've drafted a couple good players, and he said his thoughts is that they're going to be in the right direction in 4 or 5 years. And I do agree with that. I think they didn't do anything too hasty. So it's interesting to look at it. And I think it's funny because he's the Vegas commentator, but he's reassuring the Seattle fans. But I think the entire picture, like, there's some things to be expected. There's some things to be a little bit of a surprise, but I didn't think the Canucks were going to lose 2 games in a row, both like that.
I didn't either, and I'll touch on the Vancouver Canucks and my complex relationship with them later. This is going to be an interesting season for me, I think. One thing I'm really, really curious about to start off is last season scoring was up substantially. We had multiple players with 100+ point seasons,
Right.
multiple all in the Eastern Conference. All teams had a 100+ point season. I think it was 98. The bar was in the Western Conference. Um, I think injuries were higher last year than before. So what is it going to look like this season now that they've gone through a full season last season, right? I don't necessarily think COVID's going to be a challenge anymore. Border restrictions are pretty much all gone across all of North America.
Unless somehow there's another wave that goes through and like so many players go down. I agree.
Right, and most players are vaccinated.
Yeah.
A lot of jurisdictions are like, so I don't think COVID's going to be a factor this year like it has been the last 3 seasons ish. So what is this season going to look like, right? Like, are we going to see a typical, like what we saw before the pandemic, where scoring was like going up a little bit each year, but last year I think was quite an exception, especially the playoffs. Like there were ridiculously lopsided games in the playoffs last year. So I think just teams were exhausted because they weren't used to playing that much
It's
hockey,
true.
right?
It's true.
So I'm really curious to see what this season looks like. And I think about a player like Alex Ovechkin, right, who's chasing Gretzky. Can he have another great 8 season, right? In where everyone's used to being back in the league and doing the grind and things like that. Will his body hold up? Because I know you and I are hoping that he keeps this pace. But I don't know. We'll see. Like he is on the older side, so I'm really really curious to see can Ovi keep this going.
The question on the TSN analyst panel this week was, does Ovi hit another 50 goal season? He's hit, I think, 12. Is it 10 or 12 in his career? Will
Sounds
he
right.
hit another 50 goal season in this year? What do you think?
I don't know. Washington's a bit of a weaker team than they were. I think the league is adjusted back to regular 82 seasons, right? And the growing question is can he stay healthy, right? That I think when someone's in, like, I think he's 36, right? Like he's older,
Might even be
right? So
37 now, to be honest.
right. So like I think that's always the burning question with Ovi is
True.
like, what Russian illegal drugs is he taking to keep this scoring
How come
record
his
up?
knees aren't gone like all the other Russian players in the past? I
It's
don't
because he's so close to
know,
Putin.
but I say yes. I say he hits another 50 goal season. Will it be?
I'm gonna say no. I don't think so.
What do you guys think? We want to know,
Yeah.
because I think it's a burning question. Is can he keep up this pace that because he's gonna have to hit 50, 40, 50, 60 goals a year to hit this pace by the next couple of years, unless he ends up
catch
being
Gretzky.
Yager and plays till he's 45.
Yeah,
Which I don't think he
Yager,
will.
at the young age of 50, Yager is finally considered retirement.
Oh, he's
So I think
50
that
now. Okay.
yeah. So I think that's a story I'm really curious about. Of course, a big story for me is what's going to happen with the Maple Leafs, right? I mean, the regular season at this point is nothing for the Maple Leafs, right? It's all about the pressure of I think for them, they really want to win the Atlantic this year. They've gotten burned so many times not winning the Atlantic. I think they're kind of ripe to do it this year. Tampa doesn't give a crap about the regular season, right? They're just like, whatever, we'll turn it on in the when it counts. Florida's weaker this year, even though they got Kachuk. I think they're a weaker team. They also lost Mackenzie Weegar on top of that, and they're a very capped out team, so they're going to be in trouble if they run into injuries. So I think of course Montreal's not very strong. Ottawa's stronger, but not, of course, in contention for the top of the Atlantic. So I do think it's Toronto's year to win the Atlantic, and will that finally be the case? They're probably going to get Tampa in the first round again, because God has a sense of humor. So that's a really interesting storyline for me. A question that I posed to you before the podcast is, will Arizona win a game in the this year? But I think so. A large topic I'd like to discuss with you is the Conor Bedard sweepstakes. So you've got Chicago. I think the two kind of main ones are Chicago and Arizona. But I think there are going to be a few teams this year, I don't know what you think, that once they know they're out of it, they're probably going to start selling off, because this year it's the new rules. So if you finish last, you're at least guaranteed, I believe, a number 2 pick or about the top 3. I can't remember. And that top 3 this year is generational. at least the minus. Well, Michkov's a bit of a hard case because he's not available till 2026, but he's still a generational talent. So yeah, so what do you think about the race for Conor Bedard this year?
Yeah. So first of all, the Arizona Coyotes will win a game in the regular season. I don't
I
know how
don't know. Are
many.
you sure?
I don't know
don't
how many,
know.
but I think there'll be a one. I guess 81-0. I don't know, but I know. I think before we get into that, I think Arizona is playing 30 games on the road before they even
Oh, right, because
play
their
at home.
schedule, right?
So they're
Yeah, we
probably going to
discussed
lose
that.
the majority of those games. But
Hmm.
at the end of this conversation here, when we talk about Conor Bedard, I want to roll through a fire round of questions since this is our first episode. I want to run through your prospects of who is going to win the divisions and who might be your Stanley Cup contender this year. But we'll get to that at the end. What I think about Conor Bedard is you're going to see a lot of players, or sorry, a lot of teams probably get to that mid mark in the season. Just say, let's say around Christmas time, that depending on where they're sitting in the division and in the conference and their playoff hopes, they're going to start really just losing games on purpose. They're gonna kind of make it like, oh yeah, we'll play hard in the first period and kind of not play so hard later on. And probably some teams that'll fit into that are gonna be your typical, Chicago, Arizona, San Jose this year. I think Minnesota might even fall behind this year. I don't think they're gonna.
We'll
have
see.
The year
I don't think
they
they'll be
had
able
last
to.
year. I don't think so, but I don't think they're gonna have the year they did last year. But I definitely think there's going to be teams that we know for sure are going to be those lower teams, and by the time they hit mid-season, you're going to see the direction they're going to go for the rest of the season. That's my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think there'll be a few teams that are sort of on the bubble, like of the bottom, if that makes sense. So like Buffalo, right? I'm just trying to think. Ottawa. Oh,
Columbus,
well, maybe not Ottawa actually. Maybe not Columbus either because they
New
now spent the
Jersey.
money. Jersey, I think, is trying to actually, Jersey can't win the lottery, so there's no
Oh,
incentive
right.
because those jerks have won the lottery too many times.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so
Arizona, San Jose, I think,
Arizona.
yeah.
So like you definitely have like your San Jose's, your Chicago's. I mean, San Jose's not trying to suck actively, but they just know they're
They
not
do.
going to be very good. So what a team like Anaheim, right? Like they're probably going to sell. Like if things aren't going very well, right?
Yeah.
I wonder about a team like St. Louis, who's on that cusp, right?
Yeah.
Like they've got good players, they've got some good young players, but like, are they a contender anymore? Right? Like their
I
goaltending's
question that
questionable.
too.
So like, do you sell early and try and get into the sweepstakes, right? Because the top three this year, each player you're going to get is exceptional. Not Bedard exceptional, but like it's close to the Jack Eichel McDavid type of
Right. You're getting a good star regardless of your top three.
right.
Yeah.
Right, and I think Fantilli. So it's Bedard, Adam Fantilli, and Matvey Michkov.
Mhm.
Michkov's the only Michkov's the only winger in that scenario. But I mean, greatest Russian prospects since Ovechkin, and look, we're talking about him chasing Gretzky, right?
Right.
So not necessarily a slouch. The tough thing for Michkov, like I said, he's not available till 2026. So I actually even wonder if he will go in the top three, even though he is potentially a number two prospect. Like no one's catching Bedard this year. Like we made that very clear, especially how he's playing right now.
No.
He's making it very clear he is going first overall by a landslide.
And he wants to, right? He believes he's the first overall pick, and he's going to show
He
that, I think, this season.
he also believes the Vancouver Canucks are going to win the cup this year.
Did he say that?
Yes, he did. So so whenever his UFA status hits at 26, he needs to come home.
Speaking of
But anyways,
Vancouver, where do you think they sit? Like, do you think they're at any point? I don't think they're a contender. So
No.
are they going to be somebody who's going to sit low and they have a chance at the sweepstakes? Or do you think, again, they're going to be the run-of-the-mill middle team, middle of the pack, miss the playoffs, and not get a draft pick?
well, let me put a caveat on that one. If
Yeah.
Demko gets a significant injury, yes. Like the only reason that game in Philly was 3-2 was because Demko kept him in that game, right?
Right.
Like I think it was 2-0 and the shots were like 7-15, right? Like and Demko was making some Demko-esque saves, right? Like Demko, I think wants the Vezina this year, so he has some pretty high aspirations for himself. So I don't think Vancouver wants to be in that discussion. And I just think with how the team's constructed, the defense is pretty terrible. But I think they have enough pieces there that they're going to stay in the middle ground, unless they do some significant selling. Like they actually might trade Bo Horvat. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right, but they do have Miller. Well, mind you, Miller's not playing very good right now.
No.
But they could maybe I don't know. But I hope not because I'm tired of draft lotteries. But yeah, no, I think Vancouver's either going to make the playoffs and get knocked out in the first round, um, or they're just going to miss like they did last year,
I think they're
and
gonna miss again.
they'll be in that 15 range
Yeah,
where they
that's
got
what I think. Yeah.
Lekaramaki
12,
this year,
50, yeah.
right? So they could have an outside chance of drafting Bedard, which I think if that actually happened, I probably would have a heart attack.
Well, I mean, he probably would love to play at home. I mean, it's his hometown, right? So he'd love to be
North
here.
fan.
But how lucky do the Vancouver Canucks typically get with draft lotteries?
Yeah, it's funny enough. Actually, like we discussed before, Vancouver and Arizona are the ones that have been hurt the most by this draft lottery system, right? Like to think the fact that Arizona has been this terrible and they haven't had a first overall pick is pretty appalling if you think about it. But hey, I mean, now they're just the league's dumpster. So, and they can't even play in their home rink.
Oh yeah.
But anyways, hopefully
But we're not
they
going to
resolve
make
that
another
situation.
episode about Arizona, right?
We
So
could no, we'll have we can have a whole docu-series on Arizona.
if you guys want us to have a whole episode where we rant about, Arizona, even if it's just a 15-minute episode, let us know. We'll put it in the bonus episode where we just rant on Arizona.
A little
for,
extra content.
15, 20 minutes. That's fine with us. Just keep us posted.
Yeah, no. So I think a big wonder for me too, in terms of the general things in the league is yeah, I'm actually quite curious. I mean, I know you're going to ask me for my picks, but like, I think the Pacific is a bit more competitive than I thought. I think the Metro's going to be competitive. The Atlantic is always competitive, right? And the Central actually, for the longest time, being one of the strongest divisions, I think actually is one of the weakest this year, right? Really, you only have Colorado. You have Colorado, then you have Minnesota, who I think is a good team, but not what they were last year, like you said. St. Louis is a good team, but not where they used to be. You have Arizona in there, and if I think I'm missing one more, but like it's not going to be Chicago, right? So it's actually the weakest division out of probably the four that we have. So I think that's really interesting. So I think it'll make the West interesting because Winnipeg too. Winnipeg's also in the Central as well. And I think Winnipeg's a really interesting, very very interesting team where they stripped Blake Wheeler of the captaincy. Like that's going to be a fascinating story to follow this year because I think that organization's in some serious turmoil. And then I think if they're smart, they start selling, right? Especially with Bedard as available prize, right? Because you could get some good assets for Scheifele, you can get some good assets for Hellebuck, right? Like you could really do this rebuild properly, right? And they did a proper rebuild they did it proper before, right? Like, and they, if not for a very good Vegas team, would have made the Stanley Cup final, right? Probably would have lost, maybe would have lost to Washington because, I mean, one of the main reasons they lost to Vegas because they got them and Nashville beat the crap out of each other because they hated each other. But yeah, the Central's not the division it used to be. So I think it's going to be Colorado with by a long shot. And yeah, like just another thing is how will Colorado do this year, right? They've got Alexander Georgiev in net. They've got pretty much the same defense. They lost Kadri, which I think is going to be a big hole for them to fill. And now they've got I think Alex Newhook will move up to second line center, so he's younger, right? So we'll see, and I'll be kind of curious actually what Colorado will do at the deadline, if they load up again, right? So and I missed and there's other teams. The other thing too is the teams that went out and improved themselves. There's Ottawa, right? How are they going to do this year? And then Detroit too, another team, which both Atlantic teams that really improved themselves, and I think are ready to try and take the next step. So yeah, so there's some really interesting. And also, I think for me too, how many points will McDavid get this year?
Yeah.
Can he hit like 150? I'm think that's ridiculous, but it's McDavid. Who knows? But yeah, no. So I think there's some really interesting storylines heading into this season that I mean, like the Canucks are the Canucks. They brought back the same team. Let's be honest, right?
They
like
did.
they added Mikheyev. They added Lazar. I mean, like we'll just say they added Mikheyev. Like they added Lazar and Dakota Joshua. Right?
Nothing massive. No significant changes. And to your point, I think some of those changes that those other teams made right? Like those improving changes, right? How are those changes going to impact the other teams in the division is a really good point of what we'll see for the top round. Anything else you want to get off your plate before I fire round you questions here? I'm curious to see your picks of everything.
There is one last thing I
Sure.
did want to quickly talk about, and I think for
Yes.
me it is the Vancouver Canucks. And I
Mm-hmm.
think as I see this team, so actually I said this to a friend of mine just today. As I see this team, I see this cloud over this team. Since and to me, actually my friend brought up a really good point. Since Gillis was fired, there has been this cloud over this team
Mm-hmm.
of just like mediocrity and just cutting corners. Like there's just been this standard set that it's just plaguing this team, and I see it this season, right? I do think this management group was handcuffed with some really significantly crappy contracts, right? And like I said on the last podcast last season, like I see this organization doing stuff within their control, hiring new medical staff, renovating the rink, like doing stuff like they got depth pieces, right? Like, but they couldn't go out and trade the pieces they wanted to, right? They couldn't get rid of Tyler Myers. They couldn't get rid of Michael Furlan's LTIR contract. They traded away Dickinson, but it's small. It's these small things. I think they wanted to make bigger changes, but like they've had this anchor of what's been going on for these past 8 years, and then of course you have this new regime, you have this new exciting, it's their first training camp, right? Bruce Boudreau's first training camp, and it's marred in such controversy, right? You have Francesco Accolini's child abuse allegations coming out, right? You have Rachel Dory being all of a sudden let go, right? And now she's retaining counsel, right? Like there's just this cloud over this team that for whatever reason has yet to leave it. And I'm seeing it again. Right? It's only 2 games. I'm probably overreacting, but I'm just seeing the same pattern again, and it's frustrating. And for me, I don't think Boudreau is going to last the full season. I don't think Boudreau is this management regime's coach. I think Rutherford said out of respect to the latter half of last season, we give him one more season. I don't necessarily think that's a great way to give confidence to your coach. Like, why would you hire a Mike Yeo? Why would you keep a guy like what's his name? Anyways, like some of the moves they've made really made me feel that this season was going to be a punt because of some of the contracts they had. The way they just sort of like basically was like, yeah, I guess we'll keep Boudreau. You know what I mean? Like I think this new regime has a vision and they want to implement it, but there's just some other fact. Like I think really what the major factor is ownership. It's not changing, right? Ownership decided to get involved 8 years ago, and look where it's landed us, right? And now we've got another situation where it's marred. He's marred with child abuse allegations. There's this weird firing of a coach slash an analytics executive, right? Like, and it's no connection to the owner, but like the breadcrumbs lead back to him, right? And I don't know if we're ever going to fully get rid of this cloud if either he really learns to take a back step, because from what I was hearing and reading, like the trading of Dickinson was a little bit of ownership's directive to get rid of some money. I mean, did you really want to trade Dickinson? I don't know. Like, maybe not. I don't know, right? And they want to trade Michael Furlan's LTIR, right? Because they're tired of paying. Like ownership still has their teeth in this, right? And I don't know if that's going to be the case. Will this team ever fully be able to get healthy again? Like from a culture perspective, right? Like I think there's just this cancer there. And I don't think it's fair to fully put it on ownership. Maybe it is. I don't know. I just feel like there's something not right there, and I don't know what it is that's going to fix it, right? And I don't know how long it's going to take. I hope it's not long. Like, if
we've also been hoping it hasn't been long for the last 10 years.
Right, but like if you look at the situation of they extended Miller, Horvat doesn't have a contract, right? That's
Your
the
own
guy
captain.
you trade. your own captain. He's now doesn't sound like he's that happy, right? And you're in a scenario where because when Miller was not signed, they said if a month out from the trade deadline we don't have a contract, we are trading this player. So you expect that they're going to hold the same standard with Bo Horvat. And imagine a situation that you have a guy who bleeds blue and green, and I think is a good captain. I think is a good heart and soul player of your team, and you trade him over a guy like JT Miller, who
what message does that send to
right
your team, like your team personnel, your management, your fans, and your players? What message does that send, letting go of somebody who, like you said, is somebody who really does seem to bleed blue and green? He really is full in this team. He's passionate about this team and their results and how they're doing, and he is that kind of unsung hero player that, you know, when the going gets tough, he will always put in 100% for this team. And if we start seeing that lack,
that's where I'm at. It doesn't smell right, and I just don't know when it will, and it kills me.
I personally think this team will always have a bit of a cloud over them in this ownership. I don't know if things will ever change in this same ownership. But
they also got to a Stanley Cup final with this ownership, if it makes sense, right? So,
but how many issues have they had with this ownership versus the previous ownership? Like, how many failure? That's something to look into and think about too. How many bad years? How many failure years have they had with this ownership versus the previous ownership?
There's only had Orca Bay before
this team, right? Or 3.
I know they had Orca Bay before.
Well, they had the Griffiths, then the Orca Bay, then the Aquilinis.
I feel like there was ownership before the Orca Bay, but anyways, like, and I know for the most part, if you look at the history, it's either bad ownership or bad management, right? Mm-hmm. But I just feel like specifically with this team, like this regime, even though it's new and exciting and there's many great things happening, right? There's still something not sitting right with me, and I don't know what it's going to take to fix it. Maybe it is the firing of Boudreau and management team finally gets in their guy. I don't know, because like all of last season they'd said like, oh well, this effort's unacceptable and it's on us. They're saying the exact same thing 2 games in. Bo Horvat's come out saying that same thing. JT Miller's come out and saying that. Curtis Lazar, new player, saying the exact same thing they were saying all season last season. Right, so like things need to change, and I don't know what that is. Like they basically fired everybody, right? And it still has that stink on it. So it's going to be difficult I think for me to really figure out what that is.
Good points, and I think, you know, we may be a little too ahead of ourselves, right? It's still early. Let's see where they're at. Let's have another conversation about this after 20 games. Let's see where they're at that point and see, hey. Because, you know, after a good 10, 20 games, like where the direction of the team is actually going to go. They may have had 2 crappy losses here and they might win their next 5. We don't know. So I think it is early, but I wouldn't say I feel good about the direction they're going in. I didn't feel good about it in the summer. I don't feel good about it now, but we'll see. You just never know. Hockey can be this way. The NHL can be this way. We've seen teams turn around at the deadline for some years in the past. So I think that's that, and we'll check in again about that soon, and we'll have Canucks content to talk about probably every week. So I do really want to get to being this early in the season. I really want to get your perspective on where you think everybody's going to sit. So I'm going to fire around you. I just want you to first team you think honestly is going to win that division. I want you to just tell me, and then I want you to tell me who you think will be your sleeper pick this year. Don't sleep on this team, and then who you think might be the cup winner this year. So we'll start with the Pacific.
Calgary.
I'm going Edmonton, honestly. Campbell
scares me. Markstrom is more reliable.
I feel Edmonton is dysfunctional, but I mean we'll see. I think you got a good pick in Calgary, but I'm going to stick with Edmonton. Central.
Oh, Colorado,
yeah. I mean, it only makes sense. St. Louis is going downhill. Nashville's, I don't think they're there. And
it's kind of meh.
Dallas might be in there, but I don't think they're going to take the top. Atlantic.
Toronto. I think Toronto will win this year. I think it's their year to win the Atlantic.
Florida. I got to take Florida.
I don't know, man. Like, it's just like I guess it's valid. Like they won last year by a landslide. I think they won the President's Trophy too, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
But it's just I think they weakened themselves too much with that trade. I think they're so capped out that if they get injuries, they're in trouble. But yeah, I don't think that's an unfair pick.
Metropolitan.
I think Carolina will win again this year. I think New York's improved themselves. I think New York is a team that could challenge for it, but I think Carolina with getting Burns and Pacioretty will return at some point. I think they're a good enough team without Pacioretty right now, but I think that they'll definitely, especially if Anderson can stay healthy. I think for sure they're gonna win.
I love the idea of Carolina. I think it's a very valid pick, but I don't want to sleep on New York, so I'm going to go with New York on this one. I don't want to sleep.
I think it's a fair pick. I mean, I just hope they don't ride Shesterkin like they did last year, because yeah, that could be trouble.
It could be. It could be. Who is your sleeper pick this year that could come out of nowhere?
Like to win the cup or to win a
Just
division.
in general, do better than you expect. Like just sleep. Don't sleep on this team. They may make a. It doesn't mean they need to win the division, but it's somebody that could be unexpected. Like you don't take them for granted, kind of thing.
Ottawa. I think Ottawa's a very improved team. I think they were already a good team under head coach GJ Smith. I think now with rest in peace, Eugene Melnick. But I think his daughters had this year let Pierre Dorian do his job.
Yeah.
I think he did an excellent job. Alex DeBrincat, Claude Giroux. I think Giroux's a really sneaky, good signing because they still have a youngish team, right? And I believe the captain is Shabbat, but I could be wrong on that one. But like he's gonna go in there and really give that good veteran presence that I think the team needs, especially for guys like DeBrincat and Brady Tkachuk and Drake Batherson. Like they've got a really good they're a lunch bucket team, 100%. But I think with the Atlantic and some of the teams like Tampa who sleep on the regular season. Boston's a good team, but I don't think they're as good as they. I mean, they brought David Krejci back. Patrice Bergeron's going to come back, but they're significantly injured, so there's that. Detroit's improved as well. I think they're another sleeper team. I wouldn't call them sleeper. I think they're a very well improved team. They do have Mo Seider. I don't think he's ready to be like a star NHL defenseman yet. And they still got quite a few young people like Lucas Raymond and things like that. But I think with how the Atlantic is set up with some of the teams, and some teams that don't care about the regular season, teams that have weakened themselves like Florida. I think Ottawa can make some noise, and I think they can make the playoffs for sure. And then get them in the first round. They're one of those annoying teams that are hard to eliminate. So you never know.
Yeah, Ottawa is a very valid pick. I think that's a great pick. I'm really on the fence between two. LA Kings is one of them for me. I think a lot of people are going to think they're just going to have a mediocre season, but I think they're going to come out a little stronger than people expect. And then Detroit is my second one. I think people still don't see Detroit as a contender. And I think that people will be pleasantly surprised at how well they'll do this season. What's your pick for who do you think is going to win the cup? If you had to pick today, who do you think you got? It's hard, but I'm curious because I want to revisit at the end of the season.
Calgary.
There's a surprising amount of analysts that say Calgary. I'm very surprised about it.
I think if they stay healthy, and I think I'm not saying Tkachuk and Gaudreau were a problem, but with those personalities leaving the locker room, you might have the right mixture there. The one biggest key factor for Calgary, one is injuries, which is every team. But I think it's Markstrom again. Like I don't know what it is about the playoffs, but he collapsed last year against the Oilers. And like if he is the Markstrom that was top 5 Vezina candidate, I think they have a really solid D core. They have a really good top 6. They have a good bottom 6. It's a Daryl Sutter coach team, so they're very disciplined. I think they could do it. I think they could. The Pacific, you've got Edmonton in the Pacific, right? So that'll be a hard challenge for them. But like Edmonton's also another capped out team that if they have, their bottom 6 is again pretty pretty shallow, right?
Yep.
So I think they have the right pieces to win the cup. But I mean, now I'm thinking Carolina too. Like it's got to be their time at some point, right?
Yeah.
There's also New York. I mean, New York made it to the conference finals last year, right?
So who's your
They're
pick?
that. I'm
You're
still
sticking
going
with
Calgary. Yeah,
So
I think it's the because like there's obviously Colorado. You could easily say Colorado, but like there's some question marks there now,
I do
right?
think so. Yeah.
I mean, they won the cup without a goalie, anyways. But like, how is Georgiev gonna do?
Yeah.
Right? Can they win again with no goalie? Right? How are they going to respond to not having Kadri as their second line center?
Yeah.
Right? And Colorado's actually a fascinating team too because this is kind of their last year on with McKinnon's $6 million salary. Next year he's making, which I think is absolutely hilarious, 12 point, I think it's 12.5, which is $100,000 more than Connor McDavid.
Huh.
So I thought that was hilarious. That they're
Interesting.
like,
I
yeah,
didn't
you
even
get
think about
100
that.
grand more. You get 100 grand more than McDavid. Yeah, I wonder what McDavid next contract's gonna. Anyways, we can we won't talk about that. But yeah, no, so I think we've had a really good.
I was gonna
Season
say for your points, but I got two. I got one in my brain, and who's gonna win the cup this year? Before we finish here, I'm gonna cop out and choose the Tampa Bay. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But in all honesty, I'm picking the other Florida team. I think Florida, they're hungry. I think they messed up last year. They recognize they messed up last year.
They fire their coach.
I honestly think that the team's hungry. They've got a new acquisition.
New coach.
I think they have a new and I think they could do it. I think that they learned from their experience last year. They were a great team last year in the regular season, and they just messed up in the playoffs. And I think that experience is going to show this year. And I think that's who I definitively am choosing is Florida Panthers.
I think it's a reasonable pick, but I just think they've weakened themselves too much. But who knows? Like who knows what can happen in the East, right? The East will be a very interesting one because you do have Tampa lingering there. That is always a perennial.
Oh, of course.
Opportunity.
That's why it was
to
the easy
win.
cop out, but no.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing how they can keep doing that. But anyways, I think it's been a really good season opening episode, and I hope you've all enjoyed listening to us talk about some WWE and some NHL, and really looking forward to interact with you all. So please please subscribe, leave a comment, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe on our audio side too, which is with Spotify and Apple podcasts. And as I always say, my beautiful friend, thanks for chatting with me.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the season opener, and we'll catch you at the next one.